My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more.
Welcome to episode 12 of the Leader Assistant podcast.
Today's leadership quote comes from Anne Lamott. No is a complete sentence.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become irreplaceable, game-changing leader assistants.
Today's leadership quote comes from Dwight D. Eisenhower. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything.
I'm so excited to have Paige McPheely and Crystal Esquivel on the show with me today from Base Software. Before we get started, I'll share a little bit of background on Crystal and Paige. Through a passion for bringing people together, meticulous attention to detail, and the ability to organize chaos, Paige McPheely co-founded 33 Vincent, a remote executive assistant agency with her longtime friend. Together, they recruited top talent and attracted high-profile clients, growing the company organically and sustainably to employ a growing team of contract executive assistants. Years of experience with executive assistants outlined common pain points and needs in their workflow. With a genuine desire to serve the executive assistant community, Paige turned her attention to creating a solution, Base. With a beta release in 2019, Base aims to improve workflows for EAs and uplift them along the way. Paige is CEO of Base and remains an advising partner for 33 Vincent. She lives in Greenville, South Carolina with her husband Matt and their 3 sons, Jones, Sam, and Bennett. Joining Paige with me today is Crystal Esquivel. Crystal has served as an executive assistant to a variety of leaders, including CEOs, chairmen, executive directors, and founders. She has managed week-long food events in multiple cities, authored 2 books about food in her hometown of Austin, Texas, and contracted to support chefs, photographers, and cocktail experts. In 2015, she found her way to 33 Vincent, where she served as an executive assistant and the director of client success. Her years of experience as an EA, along with her understanding of the pain points of the executives they work with, led her to join CEO Paige to create an innovative software and EA support company, Base. Crystal is chief of staff at Base and is focused on building a strong and supportive EA community packed with resources and relevant content. She lives in Greenville, South Carolina, with her husband Justin and their little black cat. Now that you know all about them, let's jump right into the interview. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Leader Assistant podcast. I'm really excited for today's episode. I've got the co-founder and CEO, Paige McPheely of Base Software, and then I've got the chief of staff, Crystal Esquivel. And we are very excited to have both of you today and hear about your new company and talk a little bit about assistance. So Paige and Crystal, welcome.
Thanks so much. We're so glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump right in and just ask you about your new company. I haven't actually tried out or beta tested the software yet, so I'm really excited. I think it's actually good that I haven't, because then you can kind of tell me firsthand for the first time, while the listeners get to hear about it as well. So why don't you both just kind of chime in, maybe Paige first, and then Crystal, tell us a little bit about your new company, what you're up to, and why you're excited.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory first. After years of hiring, training, and working alongside EAs, we simply just grew tired of having the same thought over and over again. Wouldn't it be great if we had software that actually catered to what we needed and something that was actually built for EAs? So we figured if we had such great ideas that it wouldn't do anyone any good if we kept waiting for someone else to build it. So we decided to build it ourselves. And so in the long term, Base as a software tool will be the hub for all things EA. So when you come into work in the morning, you'll open up your Base and be able to do the vast majority, if not all of your work from our tool. But as we know, EAs do a lot of things. And so we had to decide, where do we start with this tool? And so where we started was actually listening, gathering a group of super elite EAs and trying to understand their best practices that we could then triangulate and form into software. So to start, we're focusing on bringing streamlined efficiency to a number of the tasks that elite EAs do as a matter of best practice. So I'll give you one example. Email digests. We know that elite EAs send some form of email roll-up or recap to their executives on a regular basis. But we also know that much of this process is manual and involves a whole bunch of copying information from elsewhere, primarily the calendar. And so our email digest builder really quickly and easily aggregates all of that information. And so far, we've seen just early results that building an email digest is now 3 times faster than it used to be with the traditional method. So that's just one example of where we're getting started and kind of building the baseline for the EA base.
Awesome. Crystal, how about you?
Yeah, so I would say that in addition to the software, Base is also striving to be the hub for EAs in community and content as well. So we, as an EA in the past, I had a really hard time finding a place for, learning and one place for all of us to chat and learn and share best practices. So we're also putting out a lot of content. We're building up a community where creating templates and ebooks and just one space that really celebrates EAs and gives them a place to learn.
Awesome. That sounds really exciting. How has the progress been so far? How have you guys run into any challenges?
So, yes, there have been little bumps along the way, but really it's been outstanding. This community of executive assistants, every single person we've spoken with has been so wonderful and warm and been excited about someone trying to build something that suits their needs uniquely. So it's been a tremendous process.
Great. So Crystal, when did you shift from, I'm an EA, you've been an EA for a while. In fact, in my last job, we had communicated back and forth. I don't know how many years ago that was.
Mm-hmm.
So small world, but yeah, when did you shift from I'm an EA to I'm an entrepreneur?
Well, I think the shift probably started at 33 Vincent. I was an EA, and then as we were growing, we found a need to have more of a client success department. And so I built that and became director of client success in addition to being an EA. So I was kind of moving into a leadership role already there. And then once Base got started, we realized that, well, first of all, I really wanted to be involved because it was something that I've been doing forever, being an EA and needing this software and needing this community. So I wanted to have a place in there, a place in the room to be able to give input and be a leader in that role. So I moved over to Base because I wanted to bring that knowledge and that excitement. And Base, what it needed at the beginning was leadership. And so that's kind of the role that I moved into.
Awesome. So how do you think being an EA prepared you to run a business?
I think that being an EA means that you have to be ready for anything. And every day is different. There's always change. There's always challenge. I tend to get bored after a couple of years in one regular job if there's not a lot of change and challenge, but that doesn't necessarily happen as an EA because things are always changing. And that's pretty much what startup work is and building software. It changes every day, and there's a lot of challenges. And so I felt ready to kind of face that because of my background. And I'd also worked with a lot of different executives as director of client success at 33 Vincent. And I learned about different industries. So I felt just kind of ready to bring that knowledge into a leadership role.
Let's kind of step back a little bit. Paige, what was your very first job?
Yes. So my very first job, I don't know what my deal was, but I was so excited when I turned 16 to get a job. I think right after I had my 16th birthday, I went to my favorite restaurant, which was a healthy fast food restaurant in Tampa, Florida, where I grew up, and just worked serving smoothies and air fries and baked chicken tenders and salads. And I was just top of the world.
So baked chicken tenders were pretty healthy, huh?
Apparently.
What's one skill in that job, that very first job, that you've used even to this day?
Sure. So customer service is everything. My mother's father was a French chef from France. And so all of us, it was a requirement as we were growing up to work in a restaurant. And I think that you learn more working in a restaurant and serving people who sometimes are not all that nice or all that caring or all that considerate of the work that you do to serve them food. And so learning to kind of swallow your pride, continue to say yes, even if you're kind of panicking inside that you don't know how you're going to get what you need to get done. And I've carried that with me into every role I've had ever since then. And I think because of that, I've learned a little bit of a skill of how to stay calm on the outside and not let my emotions get the best of me in a work setting.
That's great. Yeah, I was a busser at Outback Steakhouse while also working at Walmart. And one thing that I like to think about, how that helped me in my career is it just gave me a respect for restaurant industry workers. Mm-hmm. And so every time I go to a restaurant or, I'm about to tip a waiter or a busser comes by and grabs my dishes, I'm just like, man, I have a higher level of respect and empathy towards that kind of work because I've actually done it before.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
So, Crystal, what about you? What was your first job?
So appropriately, my first job was to do inventory and stick barcode labels on library books in the school library because I've been a nerd from the very beginning. So that was it. It was a lot of fun.
Perfect. Paige, how did you decide to start not only a company, but how did you decide to get into software? Because you're going from... I think you said you had marketing and sales background and the 33 Vincent, but how did you get the idea or the gumption to go straight into the software startup company?
That's a great question. So I'd say that it was a little bit of stupidity maybe, but what really it was is that we saw a need and we were tired of waiting for someone else to just do it for us. We decided we were going to do it. So we've learned a lot over the last year or so that we've been on this journey, primarily that working with software engineers instead of primarily EAs is very, very different. But we've also learned a ton about this industry and the pace at which it moves and the expectations of a startup in the software space. So it was a lot of not knowing what I didn't know and being ready for a challenge, but primarily knowing that we had this need and we were going to meet the need because no one else is going to do it for us.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit, Crystal. You've been how many years have you been at EA, Crystal?
At least 12 in some capacity, I would say.
Okay. So what did you love about the role and what did you hate about the role?
So I kind of mentioned earlier, I love challenge. I like it when things change. And so I love that. I also every personality test pretty much puts me in the empathy group. So it's always, how are other people doing? How can I take care of them? And being the EA role really fulfills that. So I'm able to support someone else, make sure everything's going smoothly for them. You're supposed to be thoughtful and caring and nurturing, which I'm just already going to do anyway if I know you. So it's something that really plays to my strengths. And I like feeling that I'm valuable to a person and really changing their life with what I do. So that's kind of what I loved about it. What I hate about the role is the lack of respect in general for assistant roles. I think a lot of people assume that it's a stepping stone to something else instead of the EA role being a career in itself. And it can be amazing and fulfilling, hopefully well paid, but a lot of people don't see that. And I also hear when meeting other EAs, if you ask, what do you do? What's your job? They'll say, oh, I'm just an assistant. Or I assist someone, and it's not. It's a powerful role. It's a leadership role. And I feel like I want respect to come not just from outside the community, but within as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to, when I talk to a lot of EAs, one of the things I like to hear are all their crazy stories. I know we kind of have a unique view on the world, as since we're so close to executives and so close to people that can typically be seen as unapproachable or hard to reach. So, do you have any crazy stories from your career as an EA?
I have a lot. They're usually not safe for work,
right.
But there's a lot. Getting to know someone really well, and I think that as an EA, I tend to have that really close relationship with the executive, not just as an assistant, but become kind of a confidant. So I hear a lot of really great stories. But I think kind of the daily fun thing is when I let people know, like I get a text from my executive that's, what's my dentist's name? Or what's my LastPass password? And, those silly things that you're like, why do you not know this? And people always like hearing those. The other ones, I think I'll keep from the air because they're I have a very sarcastic and irreverent sense of humor, and I tend to pull that out of my executives as well. So there's a lot of hearing the fun side of their life as well.
Pretty much every assistant that asks that question is like, well, there's the crazy stories that I can tell you and the ones that I can't.
Right. Exactly.
Paige, who was the most influential person in your life?
That's a great question. So I'd have to say my mom, which up until maybe a couple years ago, I still spoke with her every night before we went to bed. But she was a young mom in her early 20s when she had me. And then when I was only a couple years old, became a single mom. And she just, I feel like in a lot of ways we grew up together and watched her go from working multiple jobs to establishing her career, meeting her second husband and the love of her life, and then going on to have two more girls who are now my sisters and who are in high school. She's just been an inspiration to watch the transformation of her, figure out who she really is. And it's given me a lot of freedom to believe in myself and know that challenges can be overcome, and that I'll always have her as my biggest cheerleader.
Awesome. Did she have any, did you learn anything from her in regards to like entrepreneurial, running a business type skills?
So yeah, probably to be scrappy and really creative with my resources. She just could always make it work. And maybe the calm exterior that I have, I think I get from her as well, of just being able to, yes, sure. Yeah, we can take care of that. And have no idea how we're going to do it, but somehow pull it out.
Yeah. Figure it out. Awesome. So Crystal, what do you think that executives should look for in an assistant?
I think that there's kind of a long list of things, but from what I've seen in the past, looking for loyalty is really important. And that is just, your executive is who you serve and whose best interests you're looking out for. And always. So that kind of loyalty to the executive. I also have just in the past year or two learned the phrase the servant leader. And I think that's such a good mindset to have, that you are completely comfortable being in a service-oriented role, but also needing to be a leader and, manage up and be confident and make decisions and give advice, while also saying, yes, I can get that done without, feeling less than because you're serving in that capacity. So that confidence, managing up, attention to detail, willing to learn and be flexible. There's kind of a lot going on there, I guess, but I feel like the servant leader concept kind of just sums it all up in my mind.
Yeah, totally agree. One thing I counsel executives when they're looking for hiring an assistant is like, listen, you can't hire somebody that wants the spotlight, that wants to kind of use you as a stepping stone to get something else. It's just not going to work. So totally agree on the servant leadership thing.
Yeah.
So, Paige, what's one tip that you would give executives to help them get more out of their assistants? So you helped with 33 Vincent. It was a virtual remote executive assistant company. So you had a lot of clients, and I'm sure some of them did not treat the assistants well or did not know how to even use the assistants well. So what's the tip that you would give executives to help them?
Yeah, so we have seen some things, and also I'll say that, and I'm guessing you've come across this as well with your executive coaching side of things, that a lot of times executives don't really know where to start. I think that it's not really clear what a successful relationship looks like with an executive assistant, and they're not sure, are they doing it right? What could they do better? How do they even get started? So oftentimes a tip that I'll give is that it's important to realize that while an EA's role is to support you, the executive, it's not a one-sided relationship by any means, and that a successful relationship will require the executive to put in the time and effort to set up their EA for success. It's a two-way street. So it's not only a big time commitment and emotional commitment up front, but just like any relationship, it requires a lot of ongoing work so that the relationship can remain fruitful and valuable. And I think a lot of times executives think, oh, well, I just tell them, where I want to sit on an airplane and what my favorite, food is at this restaurant and where I like to have coffee meetings, and not go beyond that to that deeper level. And I think if you find the executives who really realize the power and the strength that it requires to admit just how much help that they need and are willing to receive, that's when you can unlock the key to a successful relationship.
Yeah. Crystal, what's the number one challenge that you had as an assistant and have seen in others related to being an assistant?
Oh, goodness. The number one challenge for EAs, that's hard. I think that getting started and having the executive understand that it takes a little bit of time to ramp up and learn things. I feel like, for example, at 33 Vincent, when we would place an EA in, the executive has been realizing that they need support, they need help, and they get this EA and they want to see their inbox clean in a week. They want to see the difference right away. And it takes some time of getting to know that person and getting to know their environment and their colleagues and priorities and hierarchies. So it's seeing that ramp up time. It can be frustrating on the EA side as well, because you just want to make a difference and you want to help the executive right away. But it's just that first ramp up time, I think, can be really challenging for both sides.
Yeah, onboarding is very it's the not as fun part a lot of the times, because like you said, it's like, oh, I want to get my inbox cleaned, I want my my to-do list organized, but they need to get to know you and know what your priorities are and how you work and your preferences and all that. So that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
So Paige, I want to talk a little bit about your background. You mentioned some marketing and did you say marketing and sales? Is that right?
Yeah, sales and advertising.
Sales and advertising. So there are a lot of EAs kind of coming out of the woodworks, thankfully, in my opinion, that are starting their own blogs, providing resources for other assistants, and speaking at events and really bringing other EAs together and training them. But there are also a lot that I've talked to that really are excited to do something like that, but they don't want to advertise themselves or self-promote themselves. What would you kind of say to assistants who have an idea? Maybe it's a business idea, maybe it's not necessarily an EA training blog or anything, but it's like another business or whatnot. In your advertising experience, what would you recommend to someone who wants to kind of put themselves out there, but has a hard time with kind of self-promotion?
Sure. Yeah. It's tough. And there's a lot to be scared of about it. But I'd also say in today's world, there are so many resources that can enable us to just try a little bit. It's not like we have to quit our job and put ourselves completely out there and put our finances at risk if we want to try something new. It's easier than ever before to start something on the side. And I think that a lot of companies, and I'll use 33 Vincent as an example, obviously, because I'm a big fan of theirs, but what they've always done really well is if someone in the company has an idea, then they're encouraged to bring that idea to the leadership. And not just the idea, but how would you go about it? How would you make this a reality? And either if it's something that fits within the bounds of 33 Vincent, they'll do whatever they can to make it a reality if it makes sense. Otherwise, they'll give them the coaching, the support, the training that they need. So I guess at a basic level, I'd say, don't give up, put some plan to your idea, put some structure around it, and then ask for help. People are really, really willing to help and lift you up, whether or not they're EAs like you or they're just your supporters.
That's great. What do you wish assistants would do differently, Paige?
So that's a really, really good one. I think that while many executive assistants do this particular thing really well, I've also seen a lot who don't. And this kind of adds on to the previous answer that I give. But I would really love to see more EAs take initiative and run with their ideas, particularly as it relates to the work that their executives are doing. And I think that's because EAs often have the benefit of being just slightly removed from the strategic work that their executive is leading, which can lead to a really unique vantage point or insight on that work. And so I think frequently you'll hear EAs talk about like, oh gosh, I wish that my executive would do X, Y, Z and not really say anything about it or surface that thought. But I'm willing to bet that the executive frequently would be thankful for their input and perspective, and likely take it into account.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I just wrote a guest blog post on your website about questions that assistants should ask their boss and questions that bosses should ask their assistants. And I think
it's so good.
It's pretty surprising how many assistants are like, well, I would never ask that question, or I don't think I could ask that question. And I'm like, well, yeah. I think you need to, and you need to try to ask that question.
Totally. Yeah. So I think if I summarize it, then it would be to elevate yourself as a servant leader. You are there serving an important role. You're not just there to support your executive, but your existence is actually crucial to their success. And so elevate yourself. And by the way, that blog post, when I saw the content first come in, it's like, yes, I have had this conversation 1 million times. I love that we're all speaking the same language.
Yeah, totally. So, Crystal, what's a productivity hack that you can't live without?
This is something that I kind of picked up just in the past year or two, and it's not something I usually recommend to other people because it requires weekend. But I take a little bit of time on Sunday to look at my calendar, my inbox, my task list, see what's coming up, and usually it's just 30 minutes or an hour of kind of reviewing what's happening, maybe, drafting some emails or something. And then I don't dread that crazy Monday morning as much. So when I get there on Monday morning, I already kind of know what's coming. I know what to attack first, and I'm not feeling that, coming from the weekend and, oh my gosh, how did all this happen over the weekend? So it does require a little bit of your weekend time, but it just helps Mondays be so much better.
Great tip. Yeah, I do something similar where I just pull up the calendar at minimum and just like, all right, I actually probably do this every night. Just making sure I'm not forgetting anything, making sure I'm kind of in the right mindset. That way I don't show up on, like you said, I don't show up the next morning like, wait, what? Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Exactly. It's so helpful to do that when you're alone and no one else is checking their email and no one is slacking you, and you just have that quiet mindset where you can actually think through things and you're not in the reactive mode.
Speaking of Slack, you're building the software for EAs and their bosses. Slack just, I think, submitted their IPO or whatever. I don't remember when it's happening, but there's a lot of talk about Slack. A lot of it is about the company and how it's growing and how everybody's using it, whatever. And then a lot of it, there's some research coming out now saying that Slack is actually detrimental to our productivity and our focus. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on just Slack in general as far as productivity versus email or, a project management tool, but also versus and kind of up alongside your new software that you're building. Where do you see the future of communication with your new software? So if I'm an EA, I've got email, I've got text, I've got Slack, I've got Base. Where do you see that all fitting in and tying in, and how do you see the future of EAs and their bosses working together, and which medium do you see kind of rising above the rest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough. I'll touch on Slack first. So I think that Slack, when done right, can be transformational for a business. Our time at 33 Vincent, I think we did it right. It really limited the number of internal emails that we received, and it reduced the noise overall. And then we were obviously very easily able to do search and find whatever we needed quickly. But I'll say that as we've stepped outside of 33 Vincent and started working at Base, we've got a lot more input. So now we have Slack, but we also have our CRM tool, and we also have a different project manager. And then we're not only getting our internal emails, but it's coming from everywhere else. And I always want and need an assistant, but right now, more than ever, because I feel like that's one of the most important things that an assistant can do, is help not only reduce the noise, but streamline and control the access of the noise, or control the volume of the noise, because it's a lot harder to be a gatekeeper for yourself than it is to be for someone else, and for someone else to do it for you, rather. So I think that, I love Slack. It's one of those tools that if we didn't have it, I think my job would be a lot harder, which is when you're building software, that's, kind of the response you want is, I would be very, very upset if this tool went away. But you have to make sure that it's not just one more bit of noise coming in, which is, I think, frequently what can happen, and probably leading to studies saying it's detrimental for productivity. How that relates to Base and the relationship between EAs and executives is very, very similar. So that was really the genesis of the idea for Base is, oh my gosh, as an assistant, you have to log in, log out of not only all of your tools, but you often have your logins for your executive as well. And what a waste of time, frankly. The cost of context switching is higher than time. There's a mental cost to it as well. And we wanted to streamline that as much as possible. So one thing I didn't mention about Base early on is, as an EA, you'd be able to log into the platform and you'd have your own kind of global profile. But within that, you would have different bases for each of the executives that you either supported or might need access to their information. So you can really quickly and easily toggle back and forth between the different various executive profiles. So executive A, you'd be in their base and you'd have everything right there. You're not logging in, you're not logging out, and it would be access to their calendar. It will eventually have access to to-dos, all of the things like that. And then you can do that for various executives. So even though you support one executive, Jeremy, you might need access to other executives and other members of the leadership team at your company. And so we really want it to be the hub and something that's built uniquely for EA workflows, and not adding to the noise. And another thing that we've been really careful about is not wanting to change the workflow of the executive, because the same reason, they've got so much noise coming at them. So we're thinking carefully, how can we streamline that flow without just being another tool? So that's something that is in the works that I think my VP of product and engineering would kill me if I gave too many details away on this podcast, but just know it's really important to us, and it's something that we're going to be really careful about and intentional about.
That's really, really interesting. So one thing that I've struggled with executives is, okay, here's a new software tool, and it's like, well, they're never going to log in. I just know they're never going to log into it. They're never going to use it.
Right.
So, I just basically gave up on that years ago and decided to just use my simple 2-column Google Sheet and email, basically, is what I use. And I personally like it this way. And my my bosses over the years have not had to learn a new tool or remember a new login and whatever. So that's been great.
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to kind of follow you all and see how you're able to streamline that without creating another tool for executives to not sign into.
Yeah, exactly. But Base will be built. It is built for the EAs, and it will be built in a way such that if the executive is like, no, I don't want to use this, I don't want another tool, it's not going to impact the EA's ability to use Base. It does not require two-way participation. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that we're not developing features that will make it a lot easier for the executive to engage with their EA, almost in a, like a walkie-talkie sort of fashion where there's this direct line of communication. I don't want you to think we're actually building walkie-talkies. We're not, but still streamlining that back and forth communication is really, really important to us. But we are really building this for EAs, and I don't want their ability to use this great tool hinging on the fact of whether or not they can convince their executive to use it as well.
Perfect. So have either of you hired an assistant yet for the new company, and are there plans to do so?
So yes, we are in the process of doing that. We obviously have a little bit of an in with 33 Vincent. And so, but it turns out that even as a co-founder there, we are still subject to their onboarding process. So we are in the queue, and we hope to get our new assistant in the next couple of weeks. And we are very, very excited. I think once you experience the value and the joys of working with an EA, it's super hard to go without.
Mm-hmm. Crystal, what interview questions do you ask potential assistants, or would you recommend somebody interviewing an assistant to ask?
Yeah, I think so. For me, I always end up going off script, and I have great intentions with specific questions, and then I start the interview and say, okay, let's just talk. But I always try to cover a few things within that conversation. And I think a lot of it stems from having been an EA. I'm biased to people who love the role. So I'll ask, why are you interested in this position? And not only that, but what does executive assistant mean to you? And I think when people answer that, I can gauge, are they understanding how important it is, how integral the partnership is to it with the executive? If the answer is just, well, I'll help with calendars, or maybe I'll help with email. It's like, okay, I need more from you than that. I need you to want more than that. I also ask about if they're familiar with the term servant leadership. Not that they have to be, but if I explain what that is, are they comfortable with that? Are they comfortable in that service capacity while also being confident? And especially with Base, being a software company, we'll ask, what are your favorite tools, apps, software platforms? Since we at 33 Vincent would work with remote EAs, we needed to know that they are willing to learn these types of platforms, because that's the main form of communication. And if their favorite app is Outlook and that's all, then it's not a good sign that they have taken on the interest of learning all of these new tools and what's out there and what's the best productivity tool they can use. And so I like asking that specifically for Base, but we also have kind of project type questions. Like if you were writing a one-pager for EAs, how do you wow your executive in the first 30 days? What kind of info would you include? And that helps with, seeing their process, if they understand the onboarding process, understand the integral role of it. So kind of talk through all of that without asking specific questions, because I'm horrible at that. But, and then all the usual stuff like, what kind of mistakes have you made, and how did you overcome them, and things like that.
Those are great. I think I want you to interview me just to experience it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's wrap things up. A couple quick questions. So Paige, I'll ask you first, what makes someone a leader?
So I think the ability to take responsibility and be confident and always keep moving forward.
Crystal, what would you say? What makes someone a leader?
I would add on to what Paige said and say that also just wanting to be a lifelong learner and be searching for new information, and understanding that it's, as a leader, it doesn't mean that you have all the answers. It means that you know how to get them. So admitting that you need help, but, still maintaining that confidence and taking responsibility for your own actions.
That's great. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you taking time out of your Friday morning to talk to me and share about your exciting new company. Everyone listening can find you at basehq.com and Twitter and Instagram at the Base app. So just in closing, how can we support what you're doing, and how can my listeners support what you're doing?
I would say join our mailing list, check out our blog, read our newsletter, follow us on social media, tell your EA friends that we're out there and looking out for them. Paige?
I would add that you can use the product. Sign up for your free trial today. Get in there, check it out. We're adding features pretty regularly now. And like we said earlier, we really want the feedback of this community to help us make sure we are building something that actually meets the needs of the community. So get in there. Tell us what you think.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Paige and Crystal. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Today's show notes can be found at leaderassistant.com/12.
Help my dad out and leave a review on iTunes. GoBulls.com